I've learnt so much as a line manager, which I'm going to take back to the workplace myself.
The information was amazing. So many people resonated, and there was actually a lot of functional information.
My favourite thing was the talks from Colin. I think he got the information across really accessibly, but also in a way that I felt was sympathetic to people with ADHD.
Loved hearing about the different lived experiences from Tom and from Demet. Both brought a completely different viewpoint across, so really fascinating to hear.
I wholeheartedly recommend it. 11 out of 10 or 100 out of 10.
I think they give you really practical takeaways and an opportunity to network with other people in this field in a safe environment.
This was really well thought through, brilliant speakers. People really need to check this stuff out.
Hello everybody. Wow, everyone's joining. So yeah, welcome. Great to have you all here at Skill Sessions. So Skill Sessions online. Just gonna let everybody join. Welcome, say hello in the chat. So yeah, welcome everyone to Skill Sessions. This is an event series that's both online and in person, hosted by CareScribe. It's all designed to share knowledge about areas of neurodiversity and disability, and ultimately to help build and foster an inclusive community for these sorts of topics to be discussed. Each event is based on a different topic, and we're excited to have Theo Smith here today to kick off 2024. Very exciting. So yeah, lovely to see so many of you here. Please say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from. How cold is it where you are? We're in Bristol. It's sunny, but pretty cold. Had to defrost the car again today. Most of you have already twigged, but on the Zoom chat, make sure the settings are set to all, just so everyone can see your messages. Otherwise, you're just messaging the host and the panelists. And whilst we'd love to hear from you, let's share it amongst everyone if we can. And yeah, please keep posting. Post throughout the session. Keep the chat going. If you've been to these sessions before, that's always one of the best bits, is the chat and the community that we're sort of fostering here. So yeah, brilliant. I can see a couple of other folks from the southwest and even Bristol. So that's fantastic. Sunny and cold from all over, it looks like. Fantastic. Brilliant. So I mentioned this is Skill Sessions, and it's hosted by CareScribe. So I'm going to spend just 5 minutes just telling you a little bit about who CareScribe is and what we do, and then we will get on with the webinar and hand over to Theo, who's got some fantastic wisdom to impart. So about CareScribe, who are we? So my name's Rich. I'm one of the founders and directors of CareScribe. For those of you who haven't heard of us, CareScribe is an assistive technology company, and as I mentioned, we're based in Bristol. Myself and my other two founders, Chris and Tom, we're all neurodivergent, as are many of our team. And as a company, we spend every day working to support disabled and neurodivergent individuals to work and study more independently. And we do this by building technology. We've got a couple of software tools, which you may or may not have heard of. One of them is called Captioned, which is a captioning and note-taking software that's used to help people better comprehend and retain some of the huge amounts of information that's thrown at us every day in our busy lives. Of course, that's a tremendous value to a wide range of people, those with disabilities, those with neurodivergent profiles, from those who are maybe deaf or have hearing loss, who maybe find it difficult to comprehend what's being said, to those like me who are dyslexic or have ADHD or ASD, who may have similar difficulties with focus and retention of information, or even those who have maybe a motor impairment and find it difficult to get their thoughts down quickly. Captions there, as I say, to help them to retain and comprehend some of the barrage of information that comes at us every day. And then there's TalkType. So TalkType is our other software, which is a dictation software that helps people convert their thoughts into text, something that I and a wide range of people find very challenging for a wide range of reasons. I'm not going to go into too much detail on our software. That's not the purpose of today. But if you do want to find out anything more about CareScribe or our software and technology, then please get in touch. You can pop something in the chat and we'll pick it up. We got some feedback at the end of the event, and also through our website at carescribe.io. We can set up a demo and get any information over to you. Fantastic. So finally, a little bit of housekeeping. Keep the chat coming. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Lots and lots of people. Wow, lots and lots of people joining. Fantastic. What a good start to 2024. So yeah, a little bit of housekeeping on Zoom. So hopefully you're well versed in sort of Zoom by now. But if anybody needs captions, they are available through Zoom. We've enabled them at our end, so please enable them at your end, as you know, if you require them. Questions and chat very much encouraged. If you do have questions about what we're talking about, there's a QA function. Pop it in there if you can, and we will we'll take time at the end to answer those questions. You can also upvote your questions. So if you spot something in particular that someone's written and you want an answer to, do upvote it, because if we're short of time, we'll try and prioritize them over on based on sort of demand. There's no wrong questions. This is a safe place to learn. So please, yeah, don't hold on to your questions. Do ask them. You'll be glad to know this session is recorded. So you'll be getting an email from CareScribe after the event, and it's also on LinkedIn tomorrow. So you will be able to access the recording. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that. The other thing finally to mention is that we ran skill sessions throughout 2023 and they were really, really popular, and we're just kicking off 2024 now, and we've got lots planned for the year. So we're running monthly webinars. Obviously, this is January's. We've got February's and March already out, so you can sign up to, and lots of you already are signed up to these. February's topic is reframing neurodiversity for better mental health. So if that sounds like it's of interest to you, then please sign up. We'll be sure to send you details. And March's topic is demystifying access to work, where definitely some demystifying is needed. So yeah, please tune into that if it is of interest. Finally, end of the quarter, we are at the Dyslexia Show in March. So if you're going, we're there. Come say hi. It'd be nice to see you in person. And if you're not there, take a look at it, because it looks fantastic, and maybe you'll want to join. Wonderful. So that's enough of me talking. I'm now going to hand over to Theo Smith. So for those of you who don't know Theo is the founder of Neurodiversity World. He is a LinkedIn top voice. He's the author of the award-winning book Neurodiversity at Work, and podcast host of Neurodiversity with Theo Smith. So yeah, amazing speaker, and we're very, very lucky to have him here talking about empowering neurodiversity. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Theo. Keep the chat going, and yeah, I'll speak to you at the end.
Amazing. Thank you. Cheers. That's incredible. I'm just going to do the awkward thing of sharing my screen now. So great to be here with you all. I'm going to try and inspire you, ignite some interest through some storytelling. I'm 15 plus years in leadership roles in HR, recruitment, working also within HR tech and a wide variety of organizations. And I take some of that knowledge and expertise to support organizations around neuroinclusion. So I can't do two things at once, clearly, because I was talking away and not sharing my screen, but here we go. So that should have done it. So yes, I in partnership with Dynamics Group, a talent consultancy, and yeah, there's the book and the podcast if you want to find it later on and listen to some episodes or have a little read. I co-authored the book with the incredible Professor Amanda Kirby as well, and we're now setting out to write our second book. So keep eyes out for that, but it'll probably take 12 months to get out to you all. So today's topic, here we go. Right, what is neurodiversity? And probably tons of you here are like, right, I know what neurodiversity is, right? So I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs or whatever other term is around teaching somebody something they already know. But neurodiversity for me is the natural variation in our neurological makeup, right? Every single one of us has a unique brain, billions of brain cells, like a thumbprint. Not one of us has the same. And just as bees are as important to the ecosystem, so are diverse brains, right? And we were meant to think differently. So that is what neurodiversity is. And it's a powerful concept for me because it takes a lot of the barriers down that unfortunately, and this is what we're going to talk about, sometimes labels can put up for individuals gaining access to support. Right. But if we think about neurodiversity as a concept and every single one of us having a unique brain, we're talking about all of us. But actually, what we also need to consider is, well, those of us who've been marginalized or system impacted due to the way that our brains work, right? And that's the problem that we have, that some individuals have faced barriers, and even worse, they didn't even know about it. So historically, we all know that these neurodivergent traits or neurominorities or whatever the other terminology you would like to use to describe people who've been locked out of the system because of the way that their brain works. We're talking about ADHD, dyslexia, ASD, Tourette's, dyspraxia, synesthesia, dyscalculia, Down syndrome, epilepsy. I could go on. There's also other associated challenges around chronic mental health illnesses, bipolar, obsessive compulsive disorder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For all of you that know it, right, I won't go on. But for anybody who doesn't, this is kind of the medical terminology, I would say. We've got a problem with disorder, too much use of disorder. A lot of us are starting to see it through the social model, not so much through the disability lens, although that's not to take value away from that point in conversation, because much of us need it to access help and support. It's more to say that we are, as a community, starting to reframe the way that we see ourselves and the way that we would like to see others see us. So let me take a different journey. And if you've ever seen me speak before, I would, oh yes, somebody saying there, prefer using the term autistic, preferred to autism spectrum disorder. Just jump back. That is exactly my point there. These are the medical terms that we didn't get to choose. And that's why we have a very stern looking expert there, because these terms that were medical terms are not necessarily ones that a lot of us have identified with. But we're going to come on to more about that in a second. This is the way that I want to see it, though. This is the way that I like to see the world. The Earth itself is 4.5 billion years in development, right? So that's important, right? 4.5 billion years this planet has been developing. We know that the universe is expanding at a faster rate than we ever could have imagined, right? So when we put our lives today into context of that period of time, it's a pinprick, right? It's almost inconsequential in terms of the length of time that this planet that we live on, that we're borrowing time off, right, has been developing for 4.5 billion years. Now, consider this. The Mexican Tetra blindfish, one of the most researched fish and animals on the planet, 2 million years ago, evolved or developed to be blind. It lost its eyesight initially, and eventually it lost its eyes completely. And the reason being, it took up a lot of energy when you're in the darkened caves of Mexico. And therefore, you didn't need this energy in these darkened caves to be wasted on something that you couldn't use. So they evolved to be blind. They also evolved translucent skin, all of this to optimize to the environment for survival, right? Which is incredible. 2 million years ago. But actually what we find is the Mexican Tetra blind cave fish that are now researched actually evolved to be blind only around 20,000 years ago. So not only are we seeing incredible adaptation to an environment through what we would consider potentially traumatic from our own perspective to lose eyesight and eyes, but actually it's happened, it's cyclical, it's been happening again and again. The fish is predispositioned to make these adaptations and changes. And that is incredible, that a blind fish can be more competitive in that environment than a fish with eyes because of the nature of the environment. And how little do we give that in consideration to the human brain and the way that the human brain has evolved. So now consider this. if we consider neurodiversity by design, right, the neurological variations by design, what we're talking about is the human brain has developed over 200,000 years, the modern human brain, the big one in our heads, right? And before then it was smaller. It's actually getting smaller again now. Technology, who knows where we're going? But 200,000 years ago, it became big. And the reality is, over that period of time, it's optimized to the environment. But we have a problem. If we think around what happened to the Mexican Tetra blind cavefish, and we think about 4.5 billion years of development of the planet, we think about 200,000 years of development of the human brain. Now, what have we done, I guess, since the Industrial Revolution, right? What have we done since we completely transformed the world? Possibly in less than 200,000 years. When we put people down mines, when we put people in mills to produce cotton, when we did these things, we were not thinking about the impact on the health and well-being of those individuals. We were not thinking that they would die of horrible illnesses and that they would suffer greatly. We were thinking about building stuff, right? And the world that we've now built, we've built at such a rate of speed that we cannot expect the human brain to evolve quick enough. It's not possible when we consider bright lights, noisy environments, planes, all these infrastructure that we've built, AI, machine learning, being put in chicken coops, then being told to work from home. All of these adaptations and changes are at such a rapid rate, and we've not thought about the impact on the human brain like we didn't through the Industrial Revolution and now globalization, the Internet of Things, right? So we need to think about adapting the environment because there is no way we can expect the brain to adapt at pace. And by the way, the brain has been evolving for 200,000 years to be able to adapt to the planet of 4.5 billion years. You can now see the complexity, right? This is why we have to take responsibility and accountability and open our eyes and mind to the reality that the world we're building at a rapid rate is having a negative impact on the human brain. So the reality is this topic is exploding. You go on Google Trends, you can see people across the globe are typing in neurodiversity, autism, neurodiversity movement at a rapid rate. People want to know, right? TikTok, 12 months ago, 22.1 billion views of the hashtag ADHD. 12 months before that, I took the same data. It was half that figure. I imagine, beginning of this year, it could be 40 billion, right? The reality is more and more people want to know. It's young people, it's old people, it's people across the board are now going, wait a minute, I'm facing barriers because of the way that my brain works, and I want to remove those barriers, right? And I want to influence organizations, I want to influence environments, teaching environments. I want to support my children to be able to remove some of these barriers. And that's why they go in any way they can go to be able to find information to help empower them to be able to make these changes within their environments, work environments, and for their family members. But we have this challenge, right? The challenge is that we have these labels, and the labels, unfortunately, not easy to access. And in some areas of the world, they may not even exist as labels, or they may have negative connotations, and therefore you may not want to be able to connect with those labels at all. And we segment those labels in such a way that they can be very confusing and complex, whereas we don't just have motivation, we don't just have energy, we don't just have logic, we don't just have creativity. Some of us may have more logic, more creativity, more motivation, more energy levels at any one point than someone else. But we all have them at some point, right? And they cross over, there's co-occurrence across these. Well, the reality is we now know that there's co-occurrence across these labels that we have that are attached to neurodiversity. So consider this. We have these labels and they empower individuals to be able to gain access to help and support, specifically within the school system, education system. So there are parents who are stressed out and anxious and banging their heads against the wall. They need the label because the label at the moment is the only way that we as parents can gain help and support for our child within that environment. So the ADHD label comes with support if we can get the label. Autistic label, autism label comes with support. But when in reality, like me or my daughter, we are autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, and who knows what else, we could like collect these labels up, that becomes problematic, because when you're going for one label, you may be able to get it, but then you may not get the other label. However, the reality is there's co-occurrence there. You're impacted by both. You're just not able to demonstrate. And that may well be because of your early years experience, because the diagnostic assessment model is built around those early years experiences. Well, what if you were able to get the support in those early years that meant you coped, you managed to get through the education system for whatever reason, but actually now you hit perimenopause, and actually the system that you exist in at that point as a senior leader, for example, and the barriers that you start to face and the changes in your makeup become so challenging that you can no longer function in the way that you did before. But you don't have the label, and you don't necessarily have the evidence from being a young person and being a woman, and the way that the diagnostic models worked, the barrier is significant. Well, this is when labels start to become a problem, not just in terms of accessing support and help, but actually in terms of being able to identify as having a label, to fully understand your neurological makeup, therefore to be able to let somebody know within an organization, hey, I need help and I need help because of this. It can become very confusing, and therefore the barrier exists because you can't get the help and support and that you've not had it at any point in your life. And the reality is for a lot of individuals, they may have not got the label, but they may be sitting with the trauma. So if you imagine, for me, when I was in the classroom and I couldn't say my name properly, I used to say Theo and everybody else could say Theo. It becomes very traumatic when everybody else can say your name and you can't say your name. So whether that's the dyslexia or the autism or the ADHD, whether the speech problems were associated with any one of those, in a big scheme of things, at that point, doesn't really matter to me. What matters is everybody else can say my name and I can't. Everybody else can spell and write on the board and I can't. And that trauma that we experience as a young person, whether we have a label or not, we carry through into the workplace. And especially if nobody's been able to communicate to us what that means, what it looks like, why it's happening, the impact of it, where the support exists. Even as an older person with experience and expertise and somebody who's been able to survive up until this point, when I still walk into a boardroom, I still get a heightened level of stress and anxiety because I'm asked to go and write on a board for this group of senior leaders who I'm used to talking to. But the minute I'm asked to write on a board, I still can't spell. I still can't write properly. I still can't construct grammar. Yes, I wrote a book, but with the help of technology, and nobody was stood there watching me whilst I did it. And fundamentally, this is really what's important when we insist upon labels and when we insist that people need to come with a diagnosis, or that they need to come with an expectation of what help and support they need. We already are raising the bar far too high for many people. And when we also add in the complexity of some of these labels, for somebody who's dyslexic, who struggles with words and grammar and understanding words, you've already locked me out of the conversation and the decision. How many people do we do that to? And by the way, it doesn't just exist within entry-level roles, for example. This is happening to senior leaders who maybe have coped for so long, or this might be happening to people within the legal system. This might be happening to a judge, right? If we don't have people who are ADHD within the legal system, then we're going to continue to have a disproportionate amount of people with ADHD or who had ADHD going into prison, 1 in 3 in Wales, for example, from Professor Amanda Kirby's research. So these are the things that we need to consider at all levels throughout the organization. We have barriers that we can remove, and we're not going to remove them by just having labels. And the reality is, if we talk about labels, we need to talk about disclosure. So even if we are privileged enough, even if we fully understand our neurological makeup, like who really does, the reality is, will we then want to share that information? And this is a problem that you have within the organization, is you want people to tell you about some of their challenges, their strengths, their abilities, yet there's fear and anxiety because people have experienced trauma, stigma, barriers, even in environments where they thought they were safe and later found out that they weren't. And we can see this as independent research by Ortcon in 2021, and think about what's happened since then. It's not got any better. But you can already see that, you know, I mean, 2 in 5 are not ready to tell people. So irrelevant of you want them to tell you, they're not ready. And if we think about the impact from a cultural perspective, there are some individuals who can't have this conversation at home. They can't talk about this in the community. How can you expect them to come into the workplace and talk about being dyslexic or autistic or ADHD or a combination of, when it's not even accepted to be able to have this conversation within the home environment, within their culture? This is an immediate barrier to individuals being able to gain access to support and help. So what can we do about it? What tools are available? How can we consider making some of these changes and adaptations if we can't get people to tell us, right? Because every single one of us has a unique environment, a unique workplace. We have unique challenges. We have unique pressures. By the way, we have unique individuals who put up significant barriers to us making changes. That is the reality. And we also live in a world where we don't have control of everything, even as HR leaders or business leaders, or even working within your area. We have to collaborate with so many other people, and not everyone will buy into the concept. And therefore, that can become quite challenging to get things over the line. And a great point there. And the barrier of getting a diagnosis in the first place. So my child, it took us 5 years on waiting lists and filling out forms to get the ADHD and autism diagnosis. And by the way, there were 2 separate lists, waiting lists. And when we did get it, we then had to go through the process of the HCP, because we realized actually in the education setting, the autism and ADHD diagnosis is like stilts with a match ready to burn the stilts beneath them. Because you can gain support unless those individuals who are giving you support decide they don't want to give it anymore, and you have not a leg to stand on legally. So therefore, in the UK, we had to progress to get the EHCP, which is almost impossible to get in certain areas now, and the funding has changed. Therefore, the government now wants to discourage giving out EHCPs because they want to change the mechanism of way individuals get support, and they want to push it back into the education system, which is very problematic. So yeah, I fully understand the complexity around getting a diagnosis unless you're willing to go private, and the costs are significant, and the trust has gone from some of these organizations because of the negative press in some of these areas, which has not helped. So what we need to do to remove some of these barriers is we need to consider where kryptonite exists within our systems, our processes, our communications. And I describe it as kryptonite because whether you talk about Superman or whether you talk about Clark Kent, if kryptonite is introduced into either of their worlds, they become completely disabled. They're not able to carry out any task, irrelevant of whether it's a significant power, skill, whatever. They're completely disabled to be able to do anything. And the problem we have there is that often the kryptonite within our working environments is not visible, right? And the greater challenge is that because as individuals, especially if I consider individuals with later diagnosis or individuals who've self-diagnosed based on information that they've had, not to gain anything other than insight to be able to help themselves, we have spoon-fed ourselves the kryptonite for so long. We've become used to it. That doesn't mean we're able to perform effectively in it. It just means we're so used to spoon-feeding ourselves this kryptonite that it's become a way of life. And you can define it as masking, right? But it's not just about masking. It's that idea that you do something again, 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 that is debilitating, that is harmful, that hurts you. It's like eating peanuts when you have an allergy, right? You have just enough allergy that you can survive every time, but you keep doing it because people tell you, eat the peanuts, it's fine, everybody eats them. We all have to eat our share of peanuts every single day to ensure that we complete our work. And it's become so harmful that it's significantly impacted our mental health and well-being. And that is why the topic's becoming big. We need, as a community, but also with the support of those in key positions, yes, those leaders within HR, within people functions, but also leaders of people operationally, we need you to also do something about this, to understand what the kryptonite looks like, and to support us in either bridging it so that some of us can circumvent it, or in actual fact, eliminating it, taking it away where it does not need to be there. So one way that we've been able to do this, and a way that I advise organizations to do it, is if you were thinking of a consumer process, right? If you're selling something, you go talk to your sales and marketing team, especially if you're thinking about it in a consumer market. If you're looking at the journey of a consumer, where they drop out in that journey really matters. And if you get somebody right up to the end of that consumer journey and they're almost about to buy your product or walk into your store, but they don't, that is somebody you want to hyper focus on, right? Because you want to understand why they're dropping out. And you would run that right back, and you'd adapt and change every part of that process to optimize it, to make sure that we carry that person right through. We don't do that as well with, we barely do it at all with candidates, with employees, yet candidates and employees can also be consumers as well. Therefore, they can be very important in terms of the organization that we work in. So I ask organizations to consider this, and it's not a simple process. And that may initially make you think, oh, the hint and tip Theo's giving me means it's a lot of work. But actually, I think the work's really important. And if you were to segment all of your process, if we think about your employee life cycle, and you were to break it down and segment it, and to think, okay, what parts of it do we think we might be failing individuals most from a neuroinclusive perspective? And if we started to look at those and audit those systems and processes, then we're going to be able to understand of where those barriers are. And that may well be through including your current workforce. It may be through using external suppliers or technologies or systems to be able to understand or to plug those gaps. But until we start to do that, we're going to miss out significantly. And my suggestion is to audit and assess those systems and processes. And you can do them one by one, or you can do it as a complete overhaul of all those systems and processes. However, before you start that, you need to increase awareness within your organization. You need to help your workforce understand what neurodiversity is, what neuroinclusion is, why it matters, and why you're going to start on this journey of looking at where the challenges are within the organization before you take the steps to rectify them. Because at some point, you're going to want to interview, assess, and communicate with that workforce to understand how it is impacting them. And some of that will be anonymous through surveys, and some of that will be directly through sitting down and having one-to-one conversations. Now, we've done this with an organization. We've worked with them for quite some time, but specifically around neurodiversity, around a year ago, we worked through this process with them. First of all, we talked to the board and senior leadership team and advised them on neurodiversity and neuroinclusion. So we got them bought in at the top of the organization. Now, Clarion, one of the largest health and well-being organizations in Europe, we work directly with their UK arm, Berkeley, and through working with the senior leadership team at Clarion level, then at UK level, then working with their management team to help them understand what neurodiversity is, what neuroinclusion is, what we mean by it, and how it potentially impacts their workforce. Then talking to the rest of the workforce so that they understand some of the terminology. And we then surveyed the workforce alongside doing the assessment of these different systems and processes, so that ultimately at the end of it, we could feed back to them to let them know where the barriers were and if they can remove them. And by the way, you can do this yourself. You don't necessarily need to work with an external provider. You might have somebody who's skilled in auditing and assessment. You might want to work with different providers at different areas of that process. But you need to understand where the gaps are, because until you do, you're not able to plug the gaps. You're not able to rectify them. And so much insight came out from surveying the workforce anonymously. One of the questions we asked them was, do they identify, after all the sessions we did with them, do they identify as being from a neurominority, i.e., we'd gone through sessions with them, but i.e., do you identify as being ADHD, dyslexic, dyscalculic, and do you have a diagnosis? 1 in 10 of their workforce came back and said, yes, we do. Now, what's important with that is, we don't know for 100% they accurately do. We're not asking for them to verify it with a document. But what we're now seeing is 1 in 10 people are saying within the organization that, yes, we identify with it and we're facing barriers. We then went on to ask them, if they don't have a diagnosis, do they identify with being from a neurominority and facing barriers because of their neurological makeup? We got up to 3 in 10. 2 in 10 more said yes. That was 3 in 10 of their workforce. We then ask if they have a family member who they're responsible for, who they believe to be from a neurominority. And we got up to, it was almost 50% of the workforce. Now, you can understand the impact that now has. That insight and information, along with loads of other insights that we extracted, were able then to allow the organization to take action and to start working groups and to start further training and development with managers, with the understanding that this was important to the organization. And the employees were saying, we are facing barriers, and these are the types of barriers that we're facing. At no point would individuals having to come forwards and say, I am dyslexic and help me for this reason. This was around understanding where the problems were, how it was impacting the workforce, and then thinking about a longer term strategy around how we were going to be able to deal with them. And what you then find is my co-author, Professor Amanda Kirby, has created some incredible technology and consultancy and advisory around them being able to help individuals understand their individual neurological makeup and how they can be supported. So on the one hand, you need to be understanding your systems, your processes, the barriers, the potential negative impact, lifting the lid off Pandora's box, but also then being able to support individuals that, if they're not privileged enough to be able to gain the access to support through a diagnosis, or may not want to go through that process because it's too long, you're helping them understand their neurological makeup and where some of the challenges and opportunities may come from. And the real issue here is that a lot of people may be misinformed, misadvised, misunderstood their neurological makeup, and therefore they may be struggling in communicating to the organization of what they're having problems with, of why they're not able to finish certain tasks, of why they're struggling to communicate with certain people, of why they keep on getting into hot water over certain pieces of work, conversations, etc. So I utilized the Do It Profiler by Amanda Kirby, not just for myself, when I started to explore my neurological makeup about 6-7 years ago, when I realized dyslexia that I was diagnosed with as a mature student with no formal qualifications in university. I was diagnosed there with dyslexia. It was many, many years later that I was thinking, there's something else going on in my brain, and there's other barriers and opportunities I'm just not understanding. I utilized the Do It Profiler to help me to be able to better understand that neurological makeup, and it was powerful. I then utilized it to advocate for my child, because the school were not that forthcoming, because she's highly introverted and quite quiet and compliant, and therefore wasn't a problem. Yet she wasn't obtaining the information, and she wasn't learning in that environment. And for me, if you're not learning in the environment, that's the greater problem, not whether you're compliant or not. And therefore I was able to utilize it to help me advocate for my child, because the child version enabled us to help that. Now, by the way, I'm sharing some tools and concepts and ways of working. You can do these things yourself. You can start very small. You can support employees through simple mechanisms to better understand some of the barriers and challenges. But there needs to be trust that's built there initially, based on what we were talking about around individuals are not comfortable at necessarily coming forward with specific labels. As I bring this to a close, I'm hoping to ignite. I can see, the conversations lighting up. People are talking about diagnosis, the barriers, the challenges with getting support, and it is horrendous out there. From the support from the government, from local authorities, the money is not there. We're at a tipping point. I really truly believe that, specifically within the UK. And something needs to change significantly. But I do believe we have the power in this room today to make a positive impact within the workplace, which is what we're talking about here. What I'm trying to excite and delight people around the topic here. So there's something I want to leave you with before we jump into questions that you may have. And that's, we see the world in a different way. Whatever label we want to put on it, whatever understanding of co-occurrence, everything else, we all have a way of visualizing the world. And whether that's like High Contrast, who has synesthesia, and he sees sound as color, and that literally influences all part of his music. One of the most renowned drum and bass music producers, electronic music producers in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And it's because of the way that he perceives the world through seeing sound as color that makes him incredible in what he does. Glenn Keane, who has aphantasia, or is impacted by aphantasia, however you want to define it, he cannot visualize the world through his mind's eye. He doesn't see things when he goes to sleep in the same way that some other people might. Yet he's one of the most incredible cartoonists for Disney. And Maggie Darin-Pocock, who's dyslexic. And when we think of the incredible way that she perceives and sees the world, it is more common that individuals who are dyslexic see in 3D, have incredible spatial awareness. So if we're taking the dyslexia, the aphantasia, the synesthesia, the fact that a lot of us will just see in 2D, we are visualizing the world, we're experiencing the world in such a different way. And I see what synesthesia. Synesthesia, for High Contrast, it's different for different people, but it's almost like one experience, the experience of hearing sound, is impacted by another experience that others wouldn't. So in the instance for High Contrast, it's color. So when he hears certain sounds, he has a significant color come to his mind's eye, and it's most prominent when he knows he's creating the right types of sounds. He also gets an experience of machines, so the feeling of industrial machines, and the beats are like machines, and therefore that experience of beat has a significant impact on the way that he creates and feels about music. This can also be seen not just in music, but in artists and in other areas of the world, in creative elements of the way that people experience one thing, but they have a powerful experience that can come and interplay at the same time. But this is the point, right? It is this incredible, diverse way of us seeing the world, and the Mexican Tetra blind cavefish will experience it in another completely different way, by nature of the way that we have evolved and adapted to exist in this incredible planet. But I come back to the point, we have created the barriers, we have created the challenges, we have created the bright lights, we are still creating barriers within our organization. We created systems like Horizon that meant that people went to prison and unfortunately faced significant injustice in their lives. These are things we humans created and instilled upon other people and told them it was for their own good. We have the power to remove them, to change them, to adapt them, right? But we need to take responsibility for that. And we need to go back into our environment and really take some time into consideration to assess where those barriers are, where those gaps are, and to work with others to be able to plug those gaps and empower more people to thrive at work, to succeed rather than to struggle, which so many of us have. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we can perhaps go into some questions. Thanks for staying with me.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Theo. I don't know if you would have been able to see, but there was a great conversations going on in the chat whilst you were talking, and just encouraging people to pop any questions you might have for Theo or myself in the Q&A section. We've got quite a few coming through, and also remember you can upvote as well. So please upvote any that you particularly want answers to. So I'll read out a couple of questions if that's okay, Theo, and then if you're happy to answer them. So Lucy's asked, I have a question, please, about employers paying for neurodiversity diagnostic assessments, as many employees are asking for this. In my view, this is not a very social model approach, not required for access to work, and also problematic for GPs, as they do not accept privately assessed diagnoses. Do not always accept privately assessed diagnoses. It would be great to hear your view on this. So yeah, do you have a view on sort of, I guess there was a lot of chat around difficulties getting diagnostic diagnoses through the NHS. Obviously there's private, but that comes at a cost. And then there's sometimes a need in the workplace for a diagnosis.
Yeah, absolutely. So some organizations will support it. I work with many organizations. Some see the value in the need. They may work with mental health and wellbeing charities or not-for-profit organizations. They may provide support from a psychological perspective, and therefore at a tipping point, but this is the key thing, right? A tipping point of where they feel maybe this may become a legal risk, they then may pay for private diagnosis. The problem I have here is that we still don't account in many instances for the level of co-occurrence. And we're still focused on a model that requires you to look into your past as a child to be able to identify whether or not you are autistic. You know, what were you like when you were a child? What were you like? Well, that leaves so much confusion potentially. And also, a lot of us may not be able to communicate that effectively. And therefore, we may miss out on the support because we're not able to access the label. So this brings complexity for organizations, because do they start just paying £1,000, £2,000, £3,000 for dual assessment, triple assessment, or whatever? And then because of the co-occurrence, you may not actually come out as any, but in fact, you are. It's just the model for assessment is built poorly because you're a woman and you're black and you speak English as a second language and therefore that diagnostic model did not suit your needs. We're then creating an additional layer of bias and barrier to certain people. So if you're white, you're male, the organization pays for the assessment, you get it, you pass. If you're someone else, you may not. So I think it's more complex than just should organizations pay for it or shouldn't. We should have a better system where it's intervention from the government, right? We pay taxes. This shouldn't be falling on organizations from my perspective. It should be government intervention. It should be support directly from the government. It should be coming in to reduce waiting times. Also, if we think about a 5-year period to get a diagnosis, where's the help in the 5 years? It's not there. When we think about our child, you're on a waiting list. 5 years later, you get the diagnosis. Oh, then, by the way, it doesn't really mean anything. You still don't have the knowledge and expertise. You still have to go out and learn it all yourself. You have to join communities and talk to other parents. That's where the power is. You have to talk to other people in Slack communities or in Discord communities about ADHD and be misinformed and be led by somebody who's not that genuine. So this is, you can see where companies are like, whoa, don't even want to go there or get involved. What I think we need is greater mechanisms for supporting individuals earlier on. And that's why I talk about, not just identification of a label, because if you've not got it early on, it may be more difficult to get it. But it's the identification of where are the barriers, where's the impact on mental health and well-being, where's the potential points that will mean that you may end up without a job, without a house, without support, and then you fall into a different area of support, when we could have helped so much more people before that. So I'm much more interested in the mechanisms we can put in place that are much easier, simpler, just to allow individuals that, yes, they would like a diagnosis of ADHD or autism, for example, because they believe that they are and they deserve to have that diagnosis in the wide sport. But today, really, they just want to be able to have better conversations with their manager, and they're really struggling. And it is linked with the way that they see the world, the way that they communicate, the way that the environment is impacting them and making them feel. And I think that is something that we can change tomorrow. Like, we can really start to think about that through the auditing, looking at the systems and processes and making those adaptations and changes. But we need to include the community in those conversations to make sure that we make the relevant ones within our organizations and environments and communities and education settings and what have you. Sorry, long answer, but it's complex. That's the challenge that we're facing. We need to simplify it.
That leads really nicely on to the next question, and actually I'll kind of link two together. So do you have any practical tips for line managers to help create environments in which people feel more comfortable disclosing at work? And then, if what would be a nice one is there any further down, is there any examples of any companies that you've worked from that provide examples of creating that kind of neuro-inclusive work and it being the norm?
So let me tell you, if you've not watched Sex Education, go and watch that as a program. Fascinating, right? Because I'm thinking around the generational shift as well. And the reason why I mention that is because some of the topics that come out and identify with one of the main characters, who's the mum, who as a child, she's talking as a sex therapist and he's going through some experiences. I kind of feel that almost as a dad to an ND child, as an ND dad, but who's speaking about this topic, right? Yeah, I'm vulnerable in some respects as well, because I'm a human being like all of us. So when I consider that journey and I think about having a conversation with somebody, a meaningful conversation, often if you put all the weight and responsibility on the individual, they're going to stop talking to you. So Sex Education has a great example of where the mum is almost like, oh, she told me, I didn't know what to do with it, and then she stopped talking to me. And the advice there is to, well, go back and learn something, and take something to the table and share to show you've thought about it. There's no difference with the manager, right? Where I've seen this work within organizations, I love talking to Lena and Sean at BBC many years ago, include them in the book. They basically, Lena went to Sean and went, this is who I am, this is what I'm about. So she did more, right? She came forward. And he then went, right, I'm going to go away and learn. I'm going to go and educate myself. And then I'm going to bring that back to the table and say, what do you think about that? How do you feel about that? Does that, rather than go in, oh, you tell me you're autistic, so let me tell you about all the things I might be able to do for you. Because you don't really understand them. You don't understand the complexity of their life, what's going on, their journey, all of that. You just immediately go into solution building, which is problematic. What you need to do as a manager is you need to be able to go away and educate yourself a bit, and then go like you would with any conversation. Hey, I listened to this podcast. This person was sharing this stuff about this. What do you think about that? Boom. Opened up the dialogue, opened up the conversation. No pressure on that individual to say that they need to share about themselves, but you open up a conversation about something, and that starts to enable you to develop that conversation further. Start small and build. Don't go on with the most, dramatic, problematic idea or concept first of all. Just start with, I watched this program and this is how they portrayed this thing. I found it a bit odd or strange, or I was interested or fascinated. What do you think about that? And I think that's a much more productive way to start having productive conversations within the team as well, by the way. This doesn't start as you mean to go on. Start building those conversations within the team, build them individually, and start to create that sense of psychological safety. But protecting individuals, because if that person shares with the team that they're autistic today, and you go and take another job as the leader tomorrow, where does that leave that individual? Well, it leaves them with a different leader tomorrow, and it may not be as a leader who's as empathetic, as caring, as compassionate, as understanding, as appreciative as you were. So we also have a responsibility and accountability as leaders that just because we think we're good and we're okay, and we're doing the best by them, doesn't mean the next person will. So we have to future-proof it as well. We have to think about the longer term impact on that individual who's been at the company for 15 years and we've only been there for 2 as a leader. So I think it's not as simple as individual, tell me your problems. It's what am I going to do as a leader to protect that individual, and to ensure that they're not left in a desperate situation in the future, which unfortunately I think many are. That's the problem we have.
Thank you very much, Theo, for answering that question. Yeah, I couldn't agree with more with that, I think. And yeah, I mean, we as sort of line managing people running a business as well, especially in this sort of assistive technology space, I think one of the other things I've kind of learned is kind of leading, I guess, by example. And not related to this, but it is that there's a book called Radical Candor, which somebody in our business advocated for, and I read. And one of the things that advocates for is that as a leader, it's useful to understand yourself and then voice that back to people that you manage. So for instance, for me, I'm dyslexic, I have ADHD, I struggle with lots of different things, I have quite bad anxiety. Saying, look, I'm going to be good at these things, I might really struggle with that when you bring this up, and this is kind of why, and I'm not that good at that. And if you're setting the example that you can say these things to people you manage, and you can lead by example, that you're open and transparent about the things you struggle with and how you want the business to support you, even though you might be the leader, then that does, I find, or have found, that has opened up conversations the other way as well.
Just very briefly, that's incredible, Richard, and it's right. And I interviewed a manager and an employee, and it's on the podcast if you want to hear it, but they worked in forestry. She was having significant challenges. In the end, she was identified as potentially being autistic, and she got a diagnosis and support. It transformed her experience. But what he said, which was fascinating, was that I started then explaining to her she needs to take time out, she needs to, lie down on the floor when she needs to, she can cry, whatever it is, all things that she needed to do, that she said herself, that helped her in certain instances. But then he was saying, I realized I was telling her all these things and I wasn't doing any of them myself. And he said it just having greater empathy and consideration for her on her journey made me a better human being, because actually I wasn't doing many of these things I was telling her to do. And he didn't necessarily need to like that, but he did need to think about the way that he saw the world, and that he managed his life and managed other people, and that he allowed others to manage him, and how he saw his workplace. And just by turning the table, it educated him on better mental health and well-being for him and his wider workforce. I thought it was so powerful.
Absolutely. Oh, fantastic. There's quite a lot of questions left, which I unfortunately don't think we'll get time to answer now, but we will get back to them, and we will send you responses afterwards. So even if you've got questions popping up now, then still put them in the QA, and we'll get back. But I think it's time for us to wrap up. So I want to finish by just saying massive thank you to Theo for joining us and providing us that sort of enlightening talk. That was really useful. And thank you to everyone for participating and making these webinars so enjoyable and such a dynamic events, so thanks so much for that. Everyone's going to get a CPD certificate, so as you leave, there's a survey that will pop up. If you can provide us feedback, that's really, really helpful. It helps us guide future talks and events, and make sure we're covering topics and bringing in speakers that you want to hear from. So please fill that out, and then after that you'll be sent your CPD certificate for this event. As I say, the session was recorded, so we will send that over to you along with the transcript in the next day. next month's webinars, please come along. As I mentioned, there is one in February on reframing neurodiversity for better mental health, and one in March on demystifying access to work. Do feed in via that survey to let us know what else you want to hear about as we plan the whole year ahead's webinar series. That's fantastic, and yeah, and come along to the dyslexia show. We'd love to see you there. So we'll ping you a link to join that as well. And that is it. So thanks again. Thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you to Theo. Thank you for being so brilliant and joining in the conversations. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thanks everyone.